Honourable Member for Vancouver Quadra.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to also join this debate on Bill C-4. Unfortunately, another grab bag omnibus bill that has had time for its debate cut off, so some important issues in this bill that we won't adequately be aired. I'm going to touch on several aspects of this bill and how they reflect some of the challenges and failures of this government. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start by just pointing out that this bill, a budget implementation bill, does actually very little to address the key challenges that are faced by middle-class Canadians with the challenges of rising costs and stagnant incomes for the middle class. And it does very little to create jobs. In fact, in the section on mining exploration, this bill increases taxes. Now that's not very helpful, because if you increase taxes on mining exploration, what's happening is that much of the good work to encourage mining exploration and mining development gets undermined. In my province of British Columbia, for example, and my riding of Vancouver Quadra, where many people that are working in the mining industry live, being that Vancouver is one of the centers of the mining industry globally, the government in British Columbia has spent the last 10 or 12 years rebuilding that industry in our province. In 2001, when the BC Liberal government was first elected, mining exploration investment was down to about $25 million from being in the hundreds of millions of dollars of annual investment in the 1990s. Slowly and surely, the provincial government built that confidence of the mining industry back up until there was over $250 million a year invested in British Columbia in mining exploration. So did the federal government, did the Prime Minister consult with British Columbians, with the British Columbian Premier or the Minister of Energy and Mines in British Columbia when slapping a tax onto this industry that our province has spent so much effort to build back up by respecting the industry and not adding to its tax burden. So this is a failure of management, Mr. Speaker, and this kind of failure shows that the government doesn't understand that that for jobs to be created and business opportunities, the business community needs to have certainty, and they need transparency as well. We've seen that kind of management failure in spades in this government in the area of military procurement. Now, we all would agree that the Canadian Navy, Air Force, and Army all need to replace billions of dollars worth of aging trucks, helicopters, ships, etc., so that they have safe and effective equipment for the armed forces personnel. But barely a week has passed without yet another story of this government, the Conservative government's incompetence with respect to military procurement. I want to remind this House that the acquisition of F-35 Joint Strike Fighters was restarted after the Auditor General and Parliamentary Budget Officer reports confirmed that the government knowingly misled Canadians on the program's cost, in fact, keeping two sets of books, so that in 2010, although the Prime Minister claimed the cost would be $9 billion for 65 fighters, by 2012 the full cost was pegged at more than $46 billion. So that's just one example, and there's many others. Helicopters to replace the aging Sea Kings. These Sea Kings are now, in some cases, 30 years older than the very pilots that are flying them. So this is a safety issue, that there's been only delays and uncertainty in that project. The acquisition of new Army trucks has been ongoing since 2004, and that's been restarted numerous times. Nothing expected there. A purchase of a new fleet of search and rescue aircraft has taken more than 9 years. The government is still not ready even to accept bids. The Arctic offshore patrol ships An independent reviewer said the cost was extraordinarily high for the design phase alone, but the government has plowed ahead, ignoring that, and plans to replace the 50-year-old Lee Enfield 303 rifles used by our Canadian Rangers in the Arctic. That has been cancelled. That procurement project's been cancelled with no reason given. So a very flawed procurement process, unfortunately, potentially impacting the safety of our Canadian Armed Forces, and that's a management failure on this government's part. I want to touch into another area in this bill, which is the employment insurance premiums. So we support this aspect of the bill, and we appreciate that after years of Liberal requests, the government has stopped increasing the tax on jobs, which is increasing the EI premiums as they have been increased over the years, costing billions of dollars to businesses. So we support that. But the very fact that the government has been adding taxes to businesses and small businesses is a level of fiscal incompetence, because it shows that they're not understanding the impact of these taxes on jobs. That kind of incompetence has been happening in the military budget as well. Under this government's Canada First defense strategy, a cornerstone was promised stable increase in funding. However, almost immediately, successive budgets were quietly reduced by billions of dollars, through allowing up to $8 billion in funds to lapse or stay unspent. So in fact, there has been essentially no new investment in national defense under the Conservative government, with two small exceptions. And since 2011, successive major budget cuts are now sending departments scrambling to protect the essential capacity and morale required for effective national defense. So this is another case of saying one thing and doing another. Canadians and Liberals are proud of the Canadian forces who serve Canada on our behalf without reservation. However, to do their jobs, they need to be able to depend on what they're being told. And in fact, this is a government that has decreased the Armed Forces personnel in the Navy by 11% from its strength in 2004. However, it increased by 30% the number of civilian naval employees over that period. Now, this is incompetence. It's managerial incompetence. The Army has fared no better under this government. Between 2011 and 2013, its budget has been slashed by 22%, all while headquarters received an extra $500 million in budget increases. So we hear one thing and we see another happening. And most unfortunately, we have in this bill, we have the Veterans Review and Appeal Board, a backlog board, which will see its number of members slashed, so that there will be a further backlog. And Mr. Speaker, that ties into the kind of undermining of the armed forces that we've seen under this government, where military members and their families are falling through the cracks of government bureaucracy. As these national defense budgets have been slashed, that supposedly were going to be increased, the very programs that support military personnel affected by mental illness and injury have been cut. So thousands of Canadian Force members are affected by mental health issues, and yet the very supports they need through the Joint Personnel Support Unit and through mental health professionals to help them to get strong again, find alternatives within the armed forces where they can be successful. Those supports are not there. This government must do so much better for our men and women in uniform, just as it must do much, much better for Canadians.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The Honourable Member for, can't find your list. I guess I'll go on the other side. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, let me stop at that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that covers it. I appreciate the member from Vancouver Quadra trying to direct her comments to an area of her new critic role in defense and defense procurement, but I have to take serious issue with her speech. Actually find it incredulous for her to accuse this government of undermining the Canadian forces at a time where the Canadian forces has grown and actually been equipped properly by this government, as opposed to the previous government, which really balanced its budget on the backs of defense and of our provinces. I would ask the member if she's aware of the Veterans Transition Network, a new mental health facility or a program that's been championed by the University of British Columbia in her own province, Mr. Speaker, that was previously funded by the Royal Canadian Legion, and it's been this government to actually help take that program nationally so that more of our veterans with mental health issues can be addressed. I'd like her to speak to the Veterans Transition Network and that program specifically, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Vancouver Quadra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yes, very familiar with that program. That program struggled for years without government support. I appreciate that the government has now picked up the program and is expanding it. For many years, it was supported by the Legions and had to go out talking about their successes in speech after speech, including at a breakfast policy event where the leaders of that program spoke to constituents in Vancouver Quadra. But, Mr. Speaker, I just want to touch into this parliamentary secretary's comments about reductions in support for the military, because the decade in which cuts were applied were a number of those years were under Conservative governments because of the kind of deficits that Conservatives have gotten Canadians and Canada into. And it was under the Paul Martin government that the funding began to be restored for Canadian Armed Forces. What we have now is we're closing on a decade of deceit by this Conservative government that does photo opportunities about supposed increases in funding with troops and equipment in the backdrop, and yet has done virtually nothing and is now scrambling to figure out where to put all the cuts that they've hidden but that are in their budgets.
Question et commentaires, questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Trinity Spadina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From a few steps away from here, 600 people are gathering to a first national conference on ending homelessness. As we know, there are 200,000 homeless people in Canada every year. And there's a slow motion crisis going on, and it is a definite disaster, a national disaster. Yet, in the debate, in the throne speech, and in the action plan, there's hardly any investment in building affordable housing, and the fact that the housing agreement is ending in 2014, meaning that there will be hundreds of thousands of people that have housing now will lose their affordable housing because of the end of this housing agreement. So my question really is, given this kind of crisis that is facing Canada, this kind of homelessness, what should Canada's response be? And what should be in this budget document?
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Quadra, you have about 50 seconds.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate the member from Trinity Spadina pointing out what a core challenge it is for Canadians, the issue of affordable housing and homelessness. In fact, in 2005, under the minister responsible for housing in the Liberal government, there was a comprehensive plan that had been the product of consultation across the country to invest in solutions to that issue. Mr. Speaker, this Conservative government has consistently cut supports for affordable housing, and it is at the core of Canadians' well-being, not just for lower-income people, but also for the middle class, for young families in Vancouver who can't afford to buy a house or rent suitable housing, for the mentally ill, whose situations are worsened when they don't have safe, adequate housing, and for seniors, especially women. So thank you for pointing out that very important issue.
Resuming debate, reprise.